Good morning, my dear students. We are learning the portrait of a lady, the prose written by Khuswant Singh. So, we have learned about the grandmother, grandfather of our writer Khuswant Singh. Here, the writer, the author, portrays about the grandmother. Whenever the writer was in childhood, the grandmother portrayed the physical structure, uh, walking, etc. of the grandmother. As the author told us that his mother was too old as he has seen her for 20 years. So, he is an example of pure white serenity who is breathing peace and happiness in his house, in the house of the Khuswant Singh. As we know that the author Khuswant Singh was being prepared for the school by the grandmother of the author. The grandmother prepared him for the school, and she also prepared the breakfast and tiffin also for the Khuswant Singh. The author and the grandmother were going to school together, and whenever they were returning home, the grandmother gave some stalled chapatis to the street dog as the author told us. So, the author's grandmother is an example of pure white serenity. So, my dear students, let us start the next paragraph. You see, as the author told us, what the author told us about his grandmother more is this. You see the page number 4, third paragraph. My grandmother, I were good friends. My parents left me with her when they went to live in the city. And we were constantly together. She used to wake up me in the morning and get me ready for school. She said her morning prayer in the monotonous sing song while she bathed and dressed me, that I would listen and get to know it by heart. I listened because I loved her voice but never bothered to learn it. Then she would fetch my wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk, a tiny earthen inkpot and a red pen, tie them in all a bundle and hand it to me. After a breakfast of a thick stuffed chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it, we went to school. She carried several stuffed chapatis with her for the village dog, as I told you. Next paragraph. My grandmother always went to school with me because the school was attached to the temple. The author told that the author's grandmother always went to school with the author, as because the temple, the mandir, was attached to the school. The priest taught us the alphabet and the morning prayer. In the school, the priest taught Khuswan Singh the alphabets and the morning prayer also. While the children sat in the rows on either side of the veranda, singing the alphabet or the prayer in a chorus, my grandmother sat inside reading the scriptures. While the children were singing the alphabets, reading the alphabets, learning the alphabets, or the prayer in a chorus, at the time the grandmother also sat inside the school and read the scriptures. When we had both finished, we would walk back together. When the grandmother as well as the author Khuswan Singh finished their work of learning, they returned back together. This time the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. They followed us to our home, growling and fighting with each other for the supporters with you. So, whenever the author and the grandmother returning back from the school towards home, at that time the village dog meet them nearby the temple door, and the village dog were following the author and his grandmother by growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis which were thrown by the author and the grandmother to the village dog. When my parents were comfortably settled in the city, they sent for us. When the parents of Khuswan Singh comfortably settled in the city, they called for the grandmother. That was a turning point in our friendship. Although we shared the same room, my grandmother no longer came to school with me. I used to go to an English school in a motor bus. There were no dogs in the street, and she took to feeding sparrows in the courtyard of her city house. So, a turning point came to the life of the author and his grandmother, because whenever the parents of Khuswan Singh settled in the village in the city home, at the time the parents of Khuswan Singh called the author and his grandmother to settle in the city. So, in the city, that is a turning point for the friendship of the author and the grandmother, because although they grandmother shared the same room, but the author's grandmother no longer came to school with the author with Khuswan Singh, because the author Khuswan Singh used to go to an English medium school in a school bus, school motor. So there in the city there were no dogs in the street also. So in the city state there were no village dogs, no street dogs, and the grandmother took to feeding the sparrows in the courtyard of the city house of the author. In the courtyard of the city house of the author, the grandmother used to feed the sparrows at home. As the years rolled by, as the years passed by, we saw less of each other. For some time, she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. So as the year passes away, as the days passes away, for some time the grandmother continued to wake up the author in the morning and get ready for the school. When I came back, she would ask me what the teacher had taught me. When the author, when the author grand, when the author, that is the Khushwant Singh, came back from the school, then the grandmother would ask him what the teacher in the city taught him. I would tell her English words and little things of Western science and learning, the law of gravitation's principle, the world being round, etc. Whenever the author's grandmother asked Kushwant Singh about what has been taught in the English medium school, at the time when the author told the grandmother the English words and little things about the Western science and learning and the law of gravity, Archimedes, and the principle and the world being round, etc. Whenever the author told about the English word, the little things of Western science and technology and learning, and the law of gravity and the Archimedes principle, and the world being round, why the world is being round, all these things, whenever the author told the grandmother, this time what happened? This made her unhappy. So, this thing made the grandmother unhappy because you see, she could not help me with my lessons because the grandmother could not help the author, could not help the Khushwant Singh in his lesson. She did not believe in the things they taught at the English school and was distressed that there was no teaching about God and scriptures. So the grandmother did not believe in the things which is taught in the English medium school, and the grandmother was distressed. So the grandmother was distressed that there was no teaching of God and in the city where the author's parents and the author are living. One day, I announced that we were being given music lessons. She was very disturbed. To her, music had lute associations. It was the monopoly of Harrods. It was the monopoly of harlots and beggars, and not meant for gentlefolk. She said nothing but her silence and disapproval. She said nothing but her silence meant disapproval. She rarely talked to me after that. Whenever the author told her his grandmother that the music is also teaching in the city. At the time, the author's grandmother was very much disturbed because to her, music is meant for the harlots. Music is means for the lute associations. So to her, music is means for the people of bad manners. Music is means for the prostitutes, like that the grandmother was thinking. It was the monopoly, music is the monopoly of harlots and beggars. According to grandmother, music is the monopoly of beggars and not meant for the gentle folk and not meant for the gentlemen, gentle people. She said nothing. Whenever the author told his grandmother that music is being taught in the school. At the time, the grandmother said nothing, but her silence meant disapproval of the things of music. So after that, the grandmother rarely talked to the author because she did not like music and the author is being taught music in the school, the city school. So after that, the grandmother stopped talking with the grandmother. She used to talk little with the grandmother whenever she was known that the author was being taught music in the school, in the English medium school. My dear students, for today this much only. Please learn the lesson by heart, work hard, stay at home, stay safe. Bye bye. Have a good day.